Social media satisfies our need to keep on top of what's happening in our social circles. It's hard for some of us to imagine what we did before. How did our grandparents and great-grandparents stay in the loop? Join us for a little exploration of what social media was like back in the olden days. To know what's happening today, we check our phones, tablets, and computers for our daily fix of what's going on in the world, our communities, and with our friends and families. We seem to have an insatiable appetite for gossip, information, and opinions, and worst of all, a fear of missing out. FOMO. Believe it or not, that's not a new thing. The headlines of the day would be chewed over in gathering places like the barber shop and general store. These conversations revealed a lot about the political leanings and opinions of friends and neighbors. It was also how social news was shared. Like today, we relied on trusted news sources to let us know of important events.
A day of mourning. Memorial services held at St. Mary Magdalene's and the First Methodist Church and at the Opera House. Question for 1907. Will the West End control the council? Will Roblin's Mills extend the sidewalk? Will the road grader do much work? Will there be a canning factory at Rednersville? Will the Bell Line stay at Ameliasburg?
We turn to our news sources to understand how those events would impact us.
The symptoms and dangers of the deadly epidemic which is driving so many to beds of sickness, effective treatment described. And how fitting is that given the current situation that we're in, right?
That's right. Yes.
Also, Miss Leach presents her grateful respects to her friends and the public in general, that from the continued distressing sickness prevalent in town, she is induced to postpone the reopening of her seminary. Today, we might say that it postpones the opening of our gyms and restaurants,
the school,
and schools, and so many other things. So some of the news wasn't all new.
And also like today, our sources of news are peppered with advertising for all sorts of things, and buyers need to beware of false claims. We think they're intrusive today. Back then, there were pages and pages of advertisements for all sorts of businesses and products.
Such as Castoria promotes digestion, cheerfulness, and rest. Free help for men, the only remedy known to science which will positively cure lost manhood is Restorine.
Not Viagra.
Blood poison, syphilis, the scourge of mankind. From the Bell Telephone Company. One of the many good points of a telephone is that a message cannot fail to reach its bearer correctly. Another point, can you afford to be without one at home or office? So communication was important then as it is now.
Nor is shaming and blaming a modern affliction. These newspaper clippings illustrate that calling someone out in public was almost as common as it is today.
Notice is hereby given that I have been cheated by the roguery of a false deed and other writings of a similar nature. Tobias Snyder of Marysburg wanted all to know that his wife Mary has left my bed and board. These are to forbid all persons from trusting or harboring her on my account, as I will pay not her debts of her contracting.
And when love is in the air, the social networks of the day went beyond word of mouth to include some very detailed announcements published in the local newspapers. The most interesting of these were the hymeneal announcements. An unfamiliar word today, hymeneal means belonging to wedlock, wedding, or wedding song. Hymen was the god of marriage in Greek mythology, often represented as a youth with wings carrying a torch and a veil, usually accompanied by Cupid. This is possibly the origin for the expression carrying a torch for someone. A hymeneal was a refrain of the bridal song sung by companions of the bride as she went from her home the home of her father to the home of her groom. In its later specific meaning, it was first used by Vesalius in 1550 and can be either a noun or an adjective. 100 years or more ago, some marriage announcements in newspapers were printed under the heading hymeneals. These announcements often congratulated the groom and took many forms, ranging from matter-of-fact brief mentions, which even omitted the bride's name, to long descriptions of the nuptials listing gifts received and the gift givers. Sometimes poetic, lighthearted, and creative, they are definitely a relic of times gone by. Certainly, hymeneals were an opportunity for some creative writing.
Hymen lustily wooed by City Hall staff. The commission have a good-looking assistant secretary, popularly known as Steve. Steve took it into his head last week to quietly skip out and get married, hitched up on the QT, as one disappointed excitement monger put it. Elopement. Lieutenant Chisholm has taken unto himself a rib in the person of a young, beautiful, and accomplished heiress with whom he eloped. And I'm assuming that rib must mean Adam's rib. You think it's a referral to that?
Yes, yes, but they never name her.
No, she has no name. She is just a rib.
She's a rib.
Now that the word hymeneal is so commonly used in reference to weddings, it's suggested that births should be headed crimeneal and deaths dimeneal.
Which leads us to the gossip column, where social reporters were a key source for the comings and goings of local residents.
Mrs. Abraham Crosby, who has been ill for some time, is improving and able to be around again. Henry Palmer is very low. Little hopes of his recovery.
Wouldn't that be awful to see?
Yeah, I hope Henry or Percy didn't read that. I hope Henry didn't read that. On Monday evening, a tea meeting was held at which there was a liberal turnout. And I'm assuming that is not a political comment.
No.
A quiet wedding was held at the residence of Bruce Johnson on Wednesday evening. Andrew Van Cleef is home for a few days from Albert College. Snow fell Wednesday evening, making excellent sleighing. Mr. and Mrs. R.M. Pettingill are spending a few days at Trenton visiting their daughters. A number of Wellington lads, it is reported, opened an outlet between Westlake and Lake Ontario, much to the disgust of some parties living at West Point, who were in the habit of coming to Wellington, no doubt to see some of Wellington's fair ones. Mr. J. Doherty will leave for Glasgow on Monday. Mr. Darley Allen, who wrote in the civil service examination here, has passed successfully. Miss Mills of Napanee attended a reception at Picton and retired minus a valuable gold watch and chain.
What is more enjoyable than meeting people and getting together with friends for a good time? We are social animals, after all. Whether it's an evening with friends, a dinner out, or in with that special someone you just met, today we organize dates with a phone call, text, or instant messenger request to one or a group of friends, and we expect an immediate reply. Back in the day, handwritten invitations were sent by mail and replies received by post within a very short time span. Here, Mayor Ferguson, not the current Mayor Ferguson, has mailed out an invitation on February 18th for an evening of cards, smoking, and business, only 3 days later. Another invitation to the McFalls is sent on December 5th for a December 9th lunch. Here's a letter from Lieutenant Colonel A.A. Ferguson informing someone of the death of Officer Pettit and of the funeral arrangements in Picton. To be in the know about coming social events meant keeping a sharp eye on the newspaper notices for dances, socials, and other society highlights.
Santa Claus' 7th annual visit to the Picton bookstore. Bijou Theater, one night only. Edward Dewes and his own company in a complete production of Shakespeare's great tragedy, Othello. Grand concert, City Hall by Knight McGregor, the eminent concert baritone.
In the 19th and early 20th centuries, social interaction was a richly cultivated and complicated affair, particularly in upper-class society in large cities. The tool that facilitated these interactions was the calling card. Calling cards streamlined introductions and helped remind people of new acquaintances and obligatory visits. The calling card also served as a way to brand your social identity. In a nutshell, a calling card was a device used to determine a person's group suitability or societal compatibility. Today, the visiting card seems a quaint and insignificant bit of paper, but in the past it conveyed a subtle and unmistakable intelligence. The way the card looked and felt, even the way it was handed to someone, could determine your future standing and relationship with the card's receiver. The card's texture, style of engraving, and even the hour of leaving it all combined to place the stranger, whose name it bore, in either a pleasant or a disagreeable attitude before he was permitted to make an acquaintance or explain his social position.
Such formality.
Right. Our collection of local calling cards were collected and preserved in a scrapbook. More likely, these were Christmas or New Year's greetings shared between young men and women from Prince Edward County at the early part of the 20th century and were historically not constrained by strict protocols found in large cities. Today, a Facebook friend request or group invitation operates in a similar, albeit much more casual vein. And of course, Tinder is the modern way to initiate a courtship. The last bit of instruction in the previous article on calling card etiquette has a modern ring to it.
If the resident does not care to continue the acquaintance after the first meeting, it will be discontinued by not leaving cards or by not calling again. And if the newcomers feel disinclined to continue the acquaintance, they will return the calls by leaving cards only. There you have it.
Now, when we get together, it's so easy to snap a pic of a gathering to mark the occasion or take photos when we are on vacation. But we don't stop there. We like to take pictures of ourselves, lots of them.
Isn't that the truth?
Without constraints and cost of film and developing, we take pics with gay abandon. Yesterday's Flickr wasn't so instant and required a bit more patience before the result could be seen and then shared. Let's not forget that processing was an essential service until very recently. Tech and social media platforms make it much easier to share as well. No more dusting off the family album when folks come to call. Still, who can resist hamming it up for the camera? Not all old photos are stodgy and posed. Let's enjoy a few.
Even back then, people would mug for the camera.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
Yesterday's mail delivery is today's email, and yesterday's phone is today's instant message and FaceTime. We're always trying to stay connected. Not to be confused with a present-day app of the same name, a telegram is a communication sent over a telegraph. Typically, a telegraph operator received the communication and then wrote it out for the recipient. Most telegraph operators around the world used Morse code, an alphabet consisting of a series of dots and dashes to send messages. Punctuation was written out in a telegram, with the most famous example of written punctuation being stop for a period and details usually kept to a minimum. The telegraph operator transmitted the message to the telegraph office closest to the recipient, and the receiving operator wrote the message out so it could be read by the recipient. When someone arrived at a telegraph office to send a telegram, they wrote the message out as they wished it to be transmitted. Because the process was time-consuming, most people used a very specific written style, which relied heavily on abbreviations and skipped words, rather than writing out full messages, much like has been adopted for texting today. Telegrams can also be transmitted over the phone. Before the widespread use of phones and the internet for communication, telegrams were the best way to convey information in a hurry. In most of the world today, telegrams are quite rare, and people in the West might have difficulty actually finding a company which can send and receive telegrams. Many telegraph companies offer delivery service, with a telegraph company employee dropping the telegram off at the home or business of the recipient, although people could also pick up messages in telegraph offices. Since telegrams were historically used for critical information that needed to be conveyed quickly, the arrival of a telegram could signal an emergency. The military used telegrams to notify families of deaths or wounds in combat, which made the telegraph boy a dreaded figure in wartime.
Zinger died this morning. Funeral, Madoc Sunday. Blanche.
But telegrams could also bring good news, such as marriages, births, or even winning the Nobel Prize.
From Stockholm, the Royal Caroline Institute has presented to you, together with Professor W.J.R. MacLeod, the Nobel Prize of the year 1923.
Text me when you get there. What is more natural than to let the folks back home know you arrived safely? Well, the telegram was the way to do it.
Repatriated to England. My address is Liberated, POW, RCAF Overseas. Am well and fit. All my love. Arrived South England safely. Happy New Year. Love, Wytalk.
We'll see a couple more examples of telegrams later on. While not as quick as telegrams, postcards were popular in the era before widespread adoption of the telephone. By the early years of the 20th century, an ever-increasing number of cards, amounting to several billion, were posted annually. The proliferation of picture postcards, dismissed as a craze by many observers, received further impetus with the appearance of the real photo postcard. During the golden age of the postcard, or roughly from 1900 to 1920, there is such a variety of images that they almost defy classification by subject. The broadest general categories are view cards and topical cards. The former were produced largely as tourist souvenirs and depict major cities, especially their public buildings, monuments, and artworks, or scenery and landscapes. The topical run the gamut from cards advertising goods and services, promoting civic pride and patriotism, chronicling local achievements, events, and disasters, celebrating holidays and other special occasions, and at a more intimate level, recording people's daily life, work, and surrounding environment. This one, From an Uncle to His Little Niece, shows a scene in Bancroft.
Dear Jean, don't you think you would enjoy going with me for a car drive down this pretty road? It's lovely. I enjoy it, but there is much more to it besides this. This is just a little corner, but don't you think it is nice? The hills are as pretty now, and the days so nice. I like it very much. Archie.
Divided back picture postcards, which permitted both message and address to share the same side of the card, leaving the other side entirely free for the picture, were officially authorized in Britain in 1902, in France in 1903, and in Canada the following year. In June 1906, divided back cards were endorsed by all member nations. Some postcards give us a glimpse of daily life at a more intimate level, recording people's daily life, work, and surrounding environment. This card, donated to Hastings and Belleville Community Archives by Martha Walmsley in 2007, is a good example of the divided back. It's addressed to Mrs. Rice Onderdonk in Albury, Ontario, Prince Edward County, sent by her Uncle Will from Tweed, Ontario. Here's another example of a postcard being used to send a quick note. This one appears to have a curt message reminding a sister to let them know if a package arrived.
Harry sent you a box some 3 weeks ago, and you have not sent one word whether you got them.
In large cities with multiple daily postal deliveries, a card might be received and replied to on the very day of its dispatch. For several decades, these cards were the most popular and efficient form of communication by which people could arrange meetings and dates, advertise products and services, place orders with merchants, and keep in touch with family and friends, often over great distances. Mailing a postcard was cheaper than sending a letter, but there was no expectation of privacy.
For instance, we always used to say when we get a postcard in the mail that our local mailman knew everything that was going on, because he would certainly have a little gander through the postcard before it got delivered, I'm sure.
Probably so. Still, when a more thoughtful private message is intended, letters were the way to go. It was not unusual for letters to run several pages, and if paper was in short supply, to crisscross the message to use up as much space as possible. The holidays are traditionally the time of year when folks send greetings to their friends. In this instance, the Bancrofts can't remember the names of the friends they made while visiting. What happened? They did the best they could with what they could remember.
And written on the envelope? For storekeepers on south side of street, east of post office, near the road that goes to Belleville and ends on the dock by the lake, first store west of this road on the south side.
And it never says anything about Ontario or Canada.
Yeah, right.
But they got it. Amazingly, this card found its recipient. Now, if your email message is misdirected, you'll likely get a response from the destination's mail server, aka mailer demon, telling you the mail is undeliverable. Well, in 1875, the post office would post a notice in the paper letting you know there is mail waiting to be picked up. Coming back to postcards, Seventh Town member Don Craighead has an amazing collection of vintage cards. His father, Percy, left Stirling, Ontario in June 1917 and was stationed at Seaforth Camp in England. This card may have been sent in an envelope, as it contains no message or postal information. Postcards could be extremely elaborate, and it's impossible not to admire some beautiful embroidered silk postcards sent by World War I soldiers in France to their loved ones at home. Some of the messages on the cards, written in pencil of course, are quite heartrending. A few were in fact hand embroidered, but the vast majority were made on a loom set up in a room in a home, a real cottage industry, and all the family participated in tending the loom to produce the embroidered silk. If you can imagine a piece of white organza about the size of a tea towel and made into sections, each divided by a loop kind of perforated edge, so the sections could be easily and safely separated with a cutting machine. The pattern would be followed with all the different colored silks onto the design, and after so many were completed, someone came to gather them up from the houses and then sent to a factory to be made into postcards. There were factories producing them too, but usually the larger towns where more people could man the looms. The regimental and campaign cards can fetch prices over £60 each. They are quite stunning, but there are many just flowers with messages that are so beautiful. Some are made into an envelope shape, the back of which is the card, and the silk envelope set within a border to hold it secure. There is usually a little card inside to write a message on. Among the most beautiful collectible postcards are embroidered silk cards, the vast majority of which were made in France and Belgium during the First World War and sold mainly to British Empire and US troops. The cards featured beautifully colorful imagery such as butterflies, birds, and flowers. Some of the designs incorporated militaristic or patriotic elements, such as 4 national symbols embroidered into the butterfly's wings. Don Craighead has a fantastic collection of family keepsakes, including many silk postcards sent by his father to family members during World War I. An embroidered cloth postcard to my dear mother dated September 22, 1918, to Mrs. John Craighead Sterling, Ontario, from son Percy Craighead. The message says, "Wishing you the best of luck from your loving son." Another embroidered cloth card to my dear brother, September 16, 1918, to William Craighead, Sterling, Ontario, sent by brother Percy Craighead in remembrance of William's birthday. I am sending you this card in remembrance of your birthday, wishing you all the best of luck. An embellished postcard embossed with embroidered cloth insert and gold detail from the Canadian Machine Gun Corps, dated December 1st, 1918, from Percy Craighead to his brother, Cadet John S. Craighead, a cadet stationed at Hamilton, Ontario.
Dear brother, I got a letter from you this week and was very glad to hear from you. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Write often. Goodbye, Percy.
Maple Leaf Forever postcard embroidered with flags and maple leaf, sent by Percy Craighead on October 9th, 1918.
Dear Mother, I am well. I got a box from you sent on the 23rd of September. That is the second I have got. I certainly have enjoyed everything that I have ate in it. There was a box sent before that one I haven't got. We are all having some very nice weather here now.
This card was postmarked Campbellford, August 20th, 1919, written on August 18th to Percy Craighead and Sterling from his cousin.
Dear cousin, I got your letter. Pa is getting along well. We got 3 loads of hogs. The rain has done a lot of harm.
Other cards in his collection are typical greeting cards of the time. Nora Benson was Don Craighead's mother. This gold embossed folded card with cord sends best wishes to Nora from her teacher, E. Parker, Xmas 1914. Another card for Nora is a blue and white small folded card. The inside says, "Greeting with all kind thoughts at Christmas. To Nora, from your Sunday school teacher, Lottie Moore." At the turn of the last century, the telephone revolutionized how people got in touch. The Sprague telephone system began March 27, 1898, on Big Island when James Grant Sprague decided to string a line for 2 miles to connect his house to his Uncle James Longwell. Many visitors came by buggy and Democrat to witness the event. This original telephone company eventually was expanded into Sophiasburg. Around 1908, a second line operated west and north of Wellington with the central switchboard in Hillier. At its height of success, the system boasted 100 subscribers. Before long, it was absorbed by Bell. The telephone operator recalled that people thought they had to talk louder to carry their voice farther. They would shout into the mouthpiece of the contraption mounted on the wall. Seventh Town volunteer Thelma Coulter remembers when growing up in Calidar in central Hastings County, telephones were only located at businesses. If you needed to call the doctor, you went to the general store, just like we have seen on the Waltons TV program. The telephone exchange operated by Sprague Telephone Company in Mountain View was the local telephone service for the township. In January 1908, phone service was expanded to Consacon. By July, Mr. Sprague erected a line at the carrying place. Originally located in Rednersville, Mr. Sprague consolidated operations in Mountain View around 1913. There were approximately 625 subscribers in 1956 when customers were notified the operation was being taken over by Bell. Whatever model phone you had to rent it from the phone company. This last one shown is from the O'Hara Homestead, Madoc Township.
I can remember my grandmother she had the wall-mounted phone, and she would always say, just ring me up sometime. And that's exactly what they did. They would turn the crank and ring the phone. So she always used the term, ring me up.
According to an invoice from 1908, The rental of the telephone was $10 per year. $10 in 1908 is equivalent to purchasing power to about $302 today. Here is Mr. Brickman's actual phone bill. He made 4 calls that year. Each call cost 30 cents each, which would equal $10 in today's dollars. He called Mr. Peter Trumper, the livery in Trenton, the Wellington post office, and Mr. Ham apparently used the Brickman's phone to call a doctor in Trenton. Sprague Telephone mailed the bill to the subscriber. The bill is dated August 5th and indicates they will come in person to collect $11.20 owed on Tuesday, the 11th. Sharing travel and vacation experiences is now instantaneous. Every moment of a trip is posted in real time for our friends and family to enjoy. Who can resist letting everyone know what a great place you're at? Even telegrams were adapted to the tourist industry. This souvenir telegram, for instance, is pre-formatted for a quick message home. No time to take pics of your own? Buy a bunch and put them in your trip album. Tourist locations found ways to have guests promote their establishments by providing an assortment of shareable stationery items. Postcards depicting pretty scenes of the location made it easy to share the sights. CD let the card speak for itself, a kind of "I am here" message. And while today this would be a serious breach of personal privacy, it would not be unusual to see a hotel announcing its latest cohort of arriving guests in the paper.
Arrivals at the Anglo-American Hotel in Kingston: H.W. Nielsen, Belleville; J.S. Metcalf and Lady, Indianapolis. I guess Lady didn't deserve a name, just Lady.
Maybe that's best.
Maybe so.
It's just like Google tracking your every move. Quilting bees, canning parties, and knitting circles allowed women to gather and refine their skills at various crafts. The work of making was made lighter by conversation and friendships. While we may gather ideas for new projects using Pinterest and how to make or repair items by watching a YouTube video today, in the past, watching and learning was how you learned your craft. Pattern books and manuals provided the technical know-how. Need to fix your car? Get a shop manual. Looking for a pattern? Send away for one. Looking for flower arranging ideas? Ask a local how she does it. Need help with canning, quilting, or other large craft project? Call everyone in to lend a hand. Our social interactions go beyond the personal. Much of our days are spent at work or school. How we connect today is markedly different. Large in-person gatherings have been transformed to walls of faces on a screen. And business cards, while still in use, now provide an array of electronic addresses. Whether it's finding a lost pet, locating some secondhand bargains, or raising money, we've always turned to the most efficient ways at our disposal to ask for help. No more job postings in the paper. Now we connect with jobs through online recruiting sites.
Storm windows painted, glazed, or put on. Capable woman seeks position, cook, general, or housework.
Notices in the newspaper had the greatest reach.
Lost. Woman's leather glove with brown fur back. Reward for return to Whig standard. Found. One woman's brown glove with fur back for right hand. Owner apply, Russell Street.
Oliver Krause felt compelled after 2 weeks of searching to put out an alert for a horse.
Straight from the subscriber in Kingston about a fortnight ago, a copper-colored mare. She was 4 years old last spring, short dock, 4 feet shod, and 1 forehoof considerably broke. Reward of $10.
Fundraising events are not new. In 1914, the Whig Standard promoted a charity hockey event to support hospitals.
A night of hockey in aid of 3 Kingston hospitals. Frontenac juniors and senior teams walloped in all-star team and Queen seniors.
Finding a business or product meant leafing through a business directory. At least a full page here advertising cigars and tobacconists. We leave you with this last appeal via telegram.
Lister needs 60 pounds to get married. I hope that means money.
What a catch! I need 60 pounds to get married. Many of the items referenced in this presentation are part of family history collections at the Marilyn Adams Genealogical Research Center in Ameliasburg. We're open from March to November on Tuesdays and Thursdays.